Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 222, which in fact I just noticed looking at my calendar, it's also the 22nd of May 2022, so we have a lot of fucking twos going on in here. We're really twoed out, which is great to see, because as you know, everyone loves a palindrome, as I think we always talk about every time there's a episode that's a palindrome. It's like, oh well, my name's a palindrome, but there you go, that's where we're at the moment. We're just in the twos. We're swimming in twos. Love it. I don't think I've ever seen a video game review that's a 2 out of 10. Like sometimes you'll get those 1 out of 10 reviews, like when Alex Navarro reviewed like terrible games on GameSpot back in the day. There'd be a bunch of like Big Rigs is the famous one where I think it got a 1 out of 10. But like a 2 out of 10, like how do you decide what a 2 out of 10 video game is? Because if it's that bad,
a lot of 2 out of 5s when it's a 5.
That's true.
Point scale.
Yeah, a 5-point scale is much easier though to get a 2 on versus a 10-point scale where getting a 2 out of 10. I don't know that. I'm sure there are 2 out of 10 reviews out there. I'd love to know like what makes a 2 out of 10 review.
I don't think I've really ever played, at least to completion, a 2 out of 10 game.
No, I don't think so.
Life's too short and there's too many good games at this point in time now that everything I'm playing is like at least a 7.
Yeah, totally. And sometimes if something is below that, it'll be just out of curiosity on my part anyway. And won't necessarily finish it or go like I was talking about with the Rayman Advance saga, Bally, is that I stopped playing Rayman Advance because life's too short, basically.
Brutal.
I don't think I would give Rayman Advance a 2 out of 10. I'd give it probably like a 4 or something. But it wasn't great, and I was like not having a great time. So I'm like, why am I playing this anymore? I could play something else on the train.
Is that the first Ambernet game that you've delved into and then completely rejected?
No, definitely not. I mean, I think part of this system's joy is that you have like millions of things at your fingertips, so you can just jump in and play anything. Like, I've been playing WarioWare on the train recently, actually, which is really good fun. Like, that's a great train game, the original, the GBA one. And, I haven't finished it or anything, and maybe I won't go back and finish it again, but I've already finished that game. But
that original WarioWare is really, really good.
It's so good.
So good.
Yeah, and it's actually pretty challenging as well. Like, there are some of those stages where I wasn't even finishing them first time. Like, I was having to go doing multiple shots at, like, I think it was Mona's. Mona's was really difficult. It was taking me a lot of tries to get through. But anyway, hello, hi, we're here. It's a podcast about video games, and we've almost sort of prematurely started talking about video games. But let's do the introduction stuff first. I'm joined by Bally, as always. Bally, how's it going for you?
It's going good. There's just a lot of games coming out and just little smaller games as part of this indie world that I actually picked up and played that I'm going to talk about, and I'm excited about those. So yeah, just smaller stuff. It's
going to be a very indie heavy episode, I would say, in terms of the stuff we've been playing, which is great. We always love doing that and shouting out smaller stuff, which is exciting times. So we'll be talking about that stuff and some other things as well. Bally, do you want to let the fine folks at home know what today's show will
So we've got a 2-segment show this time. First segment, we're going to talk about the Indie World presentation, and then alongside that, we're going to talk about some of the games that we have been playing. And then for the second segment, it is the return of the Jukebox.
Oh boy!
I will be testing NBZ on 5 songs from games that are on Nintendo systems that NBZ has played, and he has to guess the song.
Absolutely. So looking forward to that. Been a little while since we've done it, so gonna shake out the rust. I think last time I was a bit mean to Bally because he was mean to me the time before. So I don't know what's going to happen. Is he going to roll back around to being nice to me? I don't know. Who knows? We'll have to find out. But let's kick things off. There was an Indie World Showcase, and it's been probably a little while by the time you hear this since it happened. But sometimes Nintendo just don't like our recording schedule and decide to put it out at inconvenient moments. But I thought we'd just have a brief beef chat about it. And talk about what we thought. Generally, Bally, what are your thoughts on this presentation?
I think generally everyone's always expecting too much, and I think that in reality, it's better to have more frequent indie worlds that don't always have this crazy big banger than it is to always expect a banger, and I prefer that. So I think, do we get like 4 a year, 3 or 4 a year potentially? Like I like that we get them quite often, and by having them quite often, there's not always something huge that Nintendo can show off, and I respect that. I think there's a ton of smaller stuff that they want to talk about, and I'm happy that there are indie worlds that they put out there that just have a lot more smaller announcements, and there's still some pretty big announcements in here in my opinion, and certainly to our gaming tastes. So I really liked it. I think it's not a it's not a 2 out of 10, but it's also not a 10 out of 10. You know,
Uh-huh,
it's just like
yeah.
somewhere in the middle, and that's cool.
Yes.
I don't need my Silk Song and my Sports Story every time. Like, it's fine. It's good.
Yeah, and as we've mentioned before, Silk Song has ascended to godhood so clearly that it's never going to be part of an indie world. Like, anyone who's shouting about Silk Song in an indie world isn't paying attention to what that game's actual status is, which is
The one thing I will criticize them for is that at the very start of the indie world, they said, and we look forward to showing games developed in places like, including Australia. And now immediately, Australia fills 2 slots. It's both Team Cherry for Silk Song, but it's also Sports Story with sidebar games. So I was like, oh man. And then obviously in India, those games turned up. So I didn't like that they dangled the carrot with we got an Australian game, and then anyway. But.
Yeah, I mean, we always talk about this, but this is what happens with indie worlds at this point, is that you now have famous indie games that have sequels, and like with all major presentations, the only things people ever ask for are things that they know, right? Which is like, give me the sequel to this thing that I like already, because no one's asking for, give me something I've never heard of, because you don't know what you haven't heard of before, right? Yeah. And it tends to be the case, I think, that Nintendo like to focus on things that people haven't heard of, so that they can make the next Golf Story or the next Hollow Knight, right, become a big deal and people pay attention to. So I think that's always going to be the case, and people are always going to be disappointed by it. But any games here that stand out to you straight away that you want to chat about?
Oh, the absolute number one has to be Gumbrella.
Yes,
which just looks great. It's the developer from Gato Roboto. I've forgotten the name.
Yeah, they're called Doinksoft. I believe Devolver published them. This is one of the weird things about the trailer, is it said like from the developer of Gato Roboto and then from the publisher of Omnibus, and I was like, well, like, Devolver have published like so many famous games like Hotline Miami, like Inscription, like, what the fuck is Omnibus? I went to Steam to look it up, and it's this like weird kind of like vehicle game that did really poorly, like number of reviews is extremely low. I'm like, this is a really weird choice for this trailer. Why are you going to put the publisher of this random game that isn't even on Switch, that nobody's heard? Like, I'm trying to think of what is the link here. Why is Omnibus the game that you... Like, surely putting Inscription in there makes a lot more sense or something like that, but I don't know what the choice is. Their Devolver are weird sometimes, so whatever. I don't know.
Very weird. But Gumbrella just seems like, that fast 2D action that, Gato Roboto had, but it's not clear whether it's like level based or Metroidvania or something in between, but what's clear is that it's like, 2D platforming with an umbrella that can like grind down rails and obviously shoot because it's a gun as well as an umbrella, and that's just a great idea. And it's got like a slightly darker tone. There's a lot of like browns and greys and like in its pixel art style, and it just has a lot of great vibes going on, and hopefully like an interesting kind of weird quirky story. And I'm very excited for it, but I guess the downside is like 2023 does feel like a long time away, but who knows when.
Could be the start of 2023, who knows with that
so
stuff. And
I
I think Gato Roboto came out, a couple of years ago, maybe 2018 or something like that with Gato Roboto, so they've probably been working on it for a good long while now, which means I think it's relatively imminent, but who knows, with independent teams it often takes a little while. For me this is the strongest standout of the show. Absolutely very, very excited for it. I think this is what we in the business call a game with a very strong hook, a hook being something that is like very easily identifiable as this kind of new thing that's going to get you in the door, and this idea of this gun that's also an umbrella that you use for platforming as well as combat stuff is a strong hook. It's like the two kind of terms you have, a hook and anchor, right? And an anchor is something that that is familiar. It's like, oh, it's a side-scrolling action game, so like I am inherently interested in those. And the hook of the game is that it's doing, like, Portal is a great example of a hook, right? Of like you shoot this thing and it opens up to another one, like instantly understandable, instantly recognizable, but different and new from something you've seen before. So this is
and do you think it's more level based or Metroidvania?
They didn't say the word Metroidvania in there. They're kind of talking about it as more of an action game. So my thought is, the interesting thing, I actually went to the Steam page to look up the tags to see if that gave an indication of genre, and it said action roguelite, which
Wow,
maybe
didn't get that sense.
Yeah, I didn't get that sense from the trailer at all. So I don't know if it will have the roguelike stuff in it, or maybe they're just using that tag just for visibility purposes. Because
I'm actually up for either style, because I don't know, games like Mark of the Ninja or what's the samurai game?
Katana Zero.
Katana Zero, like they're both very level based, and I thought they were both fantastic games. So like, you can often have like a very specifically designed level if you want to do it level based, but equally Metroidvania could work for that type of game as well. Very
they have experience doing that with Gato Roboto, so it would make sense if it was that. But in any case, that's easily the number one, I think, for both of us from this presentation. But as we said, a little bit of a shame that it's a bit far out, because I think in a lot of these indie presentations, the expectation is either, it's coming out in a couple of weeks, or it's going to be like a shadow drop and it's there on the day, and it came out right then and there. But that wasn't the case here, but that's totally fine. I would like to talk about Electhead, which is the other one that really stood out to me. A game that I've actually had my eye on for quite a long time. It came out on Steam last year, and Shuhei Yoshida was actually tweeting about this game last year. He was like, hey, I'm playing this game, Electhead, it's real cool. And I was thinking, I wonder if, because Shuhei's doing a lot of indie work on the PlayStation side, whether he would have talked to the developer, and obviously, like, the developer is Japanese, so it makes a lot more sense. I wondered if that would be a PlayStation initiative, but it seems like Nintendo got to him first and were like, hey, we're Nintendo, we make platformers, you also made a cool one, so let's do it. And I really just like a game with a really great hook, which is, you're this kind of robot character who can create electricity, or like causes electricity by touching panels or the sides of areas or walls or those types of things, and using them to puzzle platform your way through, which is awesome. And the idea that you take your head off and you only have 10 seconds to get back to it, so you can kind of throw it into some area and then do a puzzle, and there's almost a timing based element to it. Really, really like that, and it seems like it's a kind of short, sweet little experience that I think would be perfect for Switch, because that's, it's one of those things where these small platformers come out on Steam all the time, and they don't necessarily do that well, but Switch is a much better home for it, and Electhead seems to be a perfect one there. So very, very excited for that, and that is coming out summer of this year, so it'll be at some point, I'm sure, dropping, probably around June, July sometime on the eShop. Excited for that one. Bally, what about yourself?
I thought Wild Frost looked quite cool. For two reasons alone, to be honest. Published by Chucklefish, but B, it looks like a cool, deck builder, and a Chucklefish deck builder is something that I think would very much be our jam, and it's coming winter this year.
I kind of had this one flew over my head when I was watching the presentation. I think maybe it came after something, maybe it was straight after Gumbrella or whatever, and I was like looking at Twitter or something like that. But I went back and looked at it, and the art style is very, very nice. Of course, you'd expect from Chucklefish to choose developers with like very crisp pixel art aesthetics, and that's certainly what we're getting here. And I've enjoyed many a deck builder. Really liked SteamWorld Quest. Slay the Spire is obviously just one of the best games ever made. Monster Train is fantastic. Like, I've played quite a few of these style of games at this point. So seeing whatever they bring to it, if they bring a new twist or something along those lines, definitely interested to see how that does. I think none of these other ones like stood out to me in a big way of like, I love this and I need to have it. But I was curious about Another Crab's Treasure. This team Aggro Crab, funnily, that obviously the developer is named after a crab, and they've only just, their second game is about crabs. Their first game is Going Under, which was a roguelike where you kind of like, it's like a kind of 3D action roguelike where you, I believe, go into the basement of an office and you keep going down the floors or something like that, like into the depths of it essentially. And I've had it on Steam for a while, but I haven't played it yet. But this is basically a Dark Souls style adventure where you're a crab, and it seems very adorable and cute, and I think it has a nice aesthetic to it, and a nice kind of like, there's this comedic twist on the Souls-like formula I think is happening at this point, where we've seen the imitators, we've seen people take serious inspiration, and now we're kind of going out the other side where people are just making games that almost not make fun of it in a way, but are like, hey, we can have a Souls-like but also make it a little goofy and out there, and take those mechanical ideas and give them a bit more of a bright, bouncy feel, if you know what I mean. So yeah, curious about that as well.
I wanted to come in and say I think Silt looks quite interesting.
Okay,
it's
cool.
Almost like this, I compare it to games like almost like an Inside, but also like a Grease, where it's just kind of like this dark. I mean, you're playing as like a scuba diver in this like 2D setting, and it's just this eerie. I believe the whole game is like hand drawn as well, which is very Greece relevant, and
Yeah.
I just think it looks very nice, and it's coming out in June, I think, which is quite
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah, very limbo as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of kind of black and white games out there. I guess Gato Roboto is one of those too. Stuff like Downfall, lots of or Downwell, sorry, lots of games like that. Minute also. So yeah, always a fan of a kind of black and white aesthetic. But Bally, you if there's nothing else you want to point out here, you actually picked up 2 of the games from this presentation, which were in fact shadow drops that came out. So why don't we get into talking about the video games transition with those games that you picked up and have been playing?
So yeah, Gibbon Beyond the Trees. I saw this first on Twitter in like this little trailer earlier in the year, and it actually came to Apple Arcade in February, and I thought that must come to like Switch at some point. So yeah, I picked up Gibbon Beyond the Trees on Switch. That was shadow dropped, as you say, just at this presentation, and it's a very short 1.5 hour experience, like 10 shortish chapters. And this game is very much on like a political mission, and that mission is to make you aware of deforestation, particularly in like Southeast Asia, and the destruction of Gibbon's homes. And that's basically the aim of the game. So you think, right, okay, but how are they going to do that in a video game context? And so you start off by learning how to swing, and I can get into the controls in a second. But then each chapter kind of takes you through like different ways in which humans are, ruining the habitats of these gibbons. So like initially it's like deforestation, and then I think one of them is like turning it into mines, and then I think there's some oil, and then there's just like the general building of cities in and amongst their homes. And I think this game does a decent job of blending like what it's trying to say with its video game mechanics. And what I mean by that is the first few chapters, you're like in the middle of the rainforest, and things feel good. The swinging feels good, and I should say the way that you can try. It's only a 2-button game, which feels very strange. It almost feels a bit like an oversimplified ollie ollie in some sort of weird way, where you're using the right shoulder trigger to climb up, and then whenever you fall, you can like grind on essentially branches using the left shoulder trigger, and it's about kind of keeping momentum. You can also do like little backflips when you release, and that will also increase your momentum when you then hook back onto another branch. And that's it. You've got your backflip, you've got climbing up, and you've got grinding down, and you just hold like the climbing up button, and the gibbon will naturally just sort of climb up in almost like a 45-degree angle off to the right of the screen. And that's it. That's all you have to do. And it is very easy to just kind of miss a branch and fall, or not have enough momentum to reach the next branch. And that's where I think the game's quite clever, where you realize that through the later levels where there's been large aspects of deforestation, you feel a lot less safe, you feel a lot less secure. And then that, I do think it's the game kind of telling you, yeah, that's because that mankind has destroyed all these trees, and now you feel unsafe as a gibbon. And it's actually demonstrating that aspect through mechanics, which I think is like a neat little twist.
Right, that whole idea of it's much easier when you have all the trees to swing between, and then suddenly they start disappearing, and all of a sudden you can kind of feel that struggle.
You can feel that anxiety, and I think that's actually done really nicely. I don't think the game is mechanically incredible. Like I think what the game does well is it's nice storytelling, and I think it's just visually a very pretty game. Like the rainforest look really cool. I think the mechanics work well for what they're going for. I will say that the game, some of the later levels where there's a lot more hustle and bustle, doesn't run as well as you might hope on a Switch, especially seeing as it launched on Apple Arcade. It seems like it really runs better on iOS systems and like iPads and all that. So that's a bit of a shame. It'd be nice if just more games like this could run a bit better on Switch. But I mean, I think I paid quite a lot of money. I think it's like £8.
It had a launch discount though, didn't it?
I think it's £11, and with the launch discount it's £8, and then with my Switch
points
credit, I brought it down to like £6. So £6 for like a solid hour and a half kind of story-driven experience. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a really I really enjoyed the message that it was kind of like making me aware of, and I like that. I was trying to look up, like, I believe the game or the developers are linked to like a couple of charities, but I couldn't find exactly how and who they're linked to and how that process, like, with development kind of worked. So I'd be interested to find out more about that. But like, it's definitely, if you want that short, I just want to play a game and experience it and come away with a nice feeling. I mean, I say nice feeling. It's a pretty depressing game. I think the game doesn't hold back in getting its message across, which is humans are bad and they're destroying gibbons, and you need to be aware of this. And they're not scared to have burning forest fires that you can quite easily, by accident, your gibbon can fall into, and your gibbon will die a horrible flame-ridden death.
It's like the Tomb Raider thing with Lara Croft, just like the kind of gore porn aspect of it.
Porn, which is, I mean, it makes you stop and think. It's not just like it's not just a happy clappy game celebrating gibbons swinging through trees. It's a lot darker than that, and you just have to be aware of that going in, because it's pretty upsetting at points. But I really loved the game. I love it when a game does something very specific, very short, and very political, and I really like that about this game. And I love it when mechanics are blended with a message, and I think this game does that in a neat little way. Although, I'll be honest, play it on your iPhone rather than Switch. I think it'll run better there.
Is that the first time Bally has advocated for playing on your phone over an actual console?
Funnily enough, both games I'm talking about in this little bit, both originally launched on Apple Arcade.
It's funny that, isn't it? It does seem like Switch becomes the de facto platform after it's been a while, you know? Like What the Golf was a great example of that, of like it has been on Apple Arcade. Same with Grindstone, that I love, like one of my favorite games on Switch, and that was an Apple Arcade exclusive for the longest time. So I do think that it's a good platform, though, as you've mentioned, at this point iPhones are more powerful than the Switch, and so I think a lot of stuff that runs really nicely on there sometimes has a little bit of an issue on Switch, or even though it's not terrible, but you know, it's not going to be as smooth an experience, unfortunately, at the moment.
So that's Gibbon Beyond the Trees. Would highly recommend, although some of those levels don't run the best. And when I say it doesn't run the best, I often just put on like my MBZ hat. I'm not often speaking with my hat, because these things very rarely bother me at all, and I thought the game was totally playable, but I knew that if MBZ played this, he'd be like, oh, what is this frame rate? What is it doing? Oh my god, I'm gonna puke this frame. I can't cope, you know, that kind of attitude. So I'm just kind of putting my MBZ hat on, and I'm sure there's people at home with an MBZ hat when it comes to these frame rates and things, so just making people aware.
For sure.
So the other game that shadow dropped and originally launched on Apple Arcade, although I think this was like at least a year or two ago, is the sequel to that Tube game. It's Mini Motorways. And this game runs a lot better than Gibbon Beyond the Trees. So like, this game runs incredibly smoothly on Switch, and that's the weird thing about the Switch, where there's some games that just are really well optimized and run really well, and there's other games that just need that little bit more fine tuning and just don't run quite as well. But Mini Motorway, I wasn't really aware of this game, but I just saw it in the indie showcase. I want to play that game. I need to play that game. And it's like a very kind of SimCity style mini systems driven kind of game. So you're essentially all you're doing is connecting factories to houses, and you're building the roads and motorways to link those houses, and that's it. And more factories and more houses keep appearing, and you have to keep linking them. And everything starts out, you know, slow and gradual, and then you're adding in like bridges and roundabouts and traffic lights. But then eventually the demand for the number of houses and number of cars that are trying to get to these factories becomes so high that you have to build your infrastructure of road networks much more efficiently to stop essentially, if it takes too long for certain cars to get to a factory, a timer will start, and you'll almost be given like this countdown, with like represented by like this red pie that gradually grows and gets closer to filling up. And when it fills up, it's the end of the level. And it's basically like a high score game. So you're kind of just trying to get the highest score as possible. And
does, once you kind of hit a score, does it let you move on to the next level? Does it gate you in any way, or is it just kind of, you know?
Yeah, you have to reach a certain score to unlock the next city. And what's quite fun is that all these places are based on real cities. And
oh, nice.
They represent those with like where the rivers and the sea and maybe like a forest or mountains are in like real life, which is quite cool. Like Zurich and Los Angeles and Dar es Salaam and all these like cities around the world. And I should say it's like a very minimalist art style. Like, it's really kind of just a white background and you've got different colored houses and different colored factories, and that's about it. It's very minimalist, and maybe that's another reason why it runs quite smoothly on Switch. And yeah, it's very much just a high score game, and I feel like I had the itch scratched quite quickly, on top of the fact that I knew that Caroline would really like this game. Like, she's very into, like, there's almost like a very simplified 2 Point Hospital or something. It's like that kind of game she's really into, and she has just completely gone to town with this game. She really loves it. I cannot beat a single one of her high scores. Like, she has a high score in every single one of the cities we've unlocked, and I cannot beat any of her scores. And it's just a very satisfying game. It's just something that both this and Gibbon Beyond the Trees were just kind of these little small games that really appealed to me, and the fact they shadow dropped, and I had like this little window where I wanted to play something new on Switch. Like, it all just kind of synced up at just the right time. And yeah, I'm really glad to play Mini Motorways. If that's your kind of game, this is a very good one. It's very simple. I think even if this isn't your kind of genre, I think it's a very simple enough concept where you can pick it up, and it's got like daily as well as weekly challenges and stuff. So there's definitely a lot of content there if you're worried that there's not enough levels. So yeah, it's a cool little game. I think I spent like maybe £10-11 on this one, so a little bit more money, but still on the cheaper end. So yeah, Mini Motorways, I'd highly recommend.
Does it have any touchscreen support, do you know, in handheld?
Oh, good question. I've not even tried. I imagine it does, but I've not tried it.
Okay, yeah, because it seems like the way that I've seen this portrayed, you are kind of creating these roads with your own kind of like curves and like bends to them and everything. Like there's a real manipulation. Yeah,
you want to be as efficient as you can with the curves because you have a very limited amount of roads.
Right.
And yeah, you don't want your roads to be... You want them to be bendy enough where it's efficient, but not so bendy that you're making a very clunky road that's going to get clogged.
Yeah, I mean, the animation seems very, like, elastic in a way that would seem fun to do on a touch-based device, right?
Oh, yeah. There's some, like, so you can, like, make a massive motorway from point A to B, and you can just, like, pull back the motorway and, like, let go, and it'll spring like an elastic rubber band, which is just a very... unimportant, needless animation, but it's very fun that it's there, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's that kind of polished thing that just adds the texture and feel to the game.
Yeah, it's a very clean, crisp, polished game, and it's nice that it runs so well on Switch.
I don't know if Mini Metro came out on Switch, the original game. It must be.
Good question. I don't know either. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's really cool that they've kind of taken that idea and just applied it in a slightly different way. And you can see them doing this with, like, I don't know, Mini Airport or like other kind of like motor or transport adjacent things to kind of continue the series.
Yeah. There actually was there was a phone game years and years ago that was like airport based, and it was all about controlling flight paths to make sure you could, and there's a similar idea where you're controlling flight paths to get as many planes to land and take off as in your airport as possible, and then it's like a high score game. It's very phone game based, that like idea, but this is one that works really nicely.
Yeah, I mean, there's one 3DS game that I still need to pick up, which is Aeroporter, which is one of the Guild series games, and that is about sorting luggage in an airport. So I'll probably be playing that at some point in the future and talking about it. But anyway, really good to hear that those games worked out, and nice to see. Obviously, with every indie world, there's always going to be some sort of shadow drops, whether it's demos or full games. But it seems like those are good ones for people to check out, which is nice to see. Now let's go back to the past. Let's find some old video games to talk about, because that's what I have been playing a little bit of. I have finally, because this has been kind of a long-term project for me, is playing through Illusion of Gaia. I finally finished that game. So if you don't know what Illusion of Gaia is, last year on the show I talked about Soul Blazer, and Soul Blazer was a game from Quintet being kind of a developer back in the Super Nintendo days, who made lots of kind of action RPG style games, and they are in particular well known for ActRaiser. ActRaiser is a weird blend of kind of top-down city management and side-scrolling action game, and a lot of people love ActRaiser. And they actually remade ActRaiser, I think, recently with a remake that I wasn't a big fan of the art style of, but seems like it's done okay. It's been obviously something that I've been very interested in a while, because people talk about their kind of post-ActRaiser games, which is Soul Blazer, Illusion of Gaia, and Terra Nigma, as this kind of pseudo-trilogy, right? They're kind of like this pseudo action RPG trilogy on the Super Nintendo, and my goal has been to kind of play through all three of them. And so I finished Soul Blazer last year, and now I've played Illusion of Gaia, and it's really interesting because I think this game is a big step up from that first one. Obviously, these are all kind of disconnected. They're not, none of them are set in the same world or with the same characters. They're all very different in that style, but I guess the through line is they have some similar ideas. And Illusion of Gaia kind of follows the format of, you are this character who, goes through various dungeons, killing enemies, solving puzzles, that sort of kind of Zelda-style action perspective. But this one's a lot more story focused. So, in the sense that you kind of start off in this small town, it feels like very much like a start of a JRPG, and you have like this town to go around, and you talk to characters, and your character called Will has this kind of friend group that he hangs out with, and you kind of like chatting with people. And a lot of it is kind of typical JRPG stuff at the beginning, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to leave town, and the expectation usually for an RPG is like you leave town, and then you go into the overworld, and you explore the overworld until you get to the next town, etc. But you leave town, and it kind of switches to a Super Nintendo. What was it? The FX chip style thing where, like in Final Fantasy 7? Yeah, Mode 7 stuff where you have like in Final Fantasy where you're in the airship and you kind of go around the overworld. It just kind of switches that perspective, and then it shows like a mini cutscene almost of your characters just like walking to the next place, and then you just arrive and you're there. So it feels like they kind of almost cut out the middle part, like where you go and do exploration in the overworld, and you're just kind of like, oh, you're just at the next place. And the weird thing about this world is it's kind of this weird mix of fantasy and reality where you're visiting locations, like you go to the Incan ruins and you go to the Great Wall of China and Angkor Wat, and like these historical like Earth settings, but the world itself is not set up like Earth at all. There's a city you go to that's just called Euro, and it's like, is this supposed to be some kind of like amalgamation of Europe in one city? It's a really weird thing, and the world map doesn't look anything like Earth at all, and it's strange how they kind of like blend these actual, because like the Great Wall of China is a dungeon. Like you go across the wall, and you like go into all these places surrounding it, and yeah, it's a really interesting way that they set things up. But in terms of the actual combat, it is somewhat similar, I'll say, to Soul Blazer, and the ideas are a little bit similar in that, so in that game, you had to defeat every enemy in order to progress, usually. So you'd have to complete, there'd be enemies, and there'd be these kind of spawn points, these weird spawn points that would keep spawning enemies, and you'd have to defeat every enemy from the spawn point would disappear, and then you would kind of like get the next area opened up to you. In this game, they have enemies on the screen, but when you look at the map is kind of like, it's all black, and you see these kind of head icons like dotted about, and that tells you like the location of enemies, but it doesn't actually show you the space itself. It's not like a Zelda dungeon map where it shows you what the actual layout looks like. It's just all black, and you can just see where the enemies are, so you kind of know where to navigate to based on like their direction. And it never gets too hard in the navigation stuff. Like later on in the game, they do some stuff which is a little trickier, but I actually found like the later dungeons to be even more interesting, just because of the way that you kind of interconnect with them, and kind of you do really have to like learn where things are and places, and how to get through all these areas. But by killing all the enemies, it's not necessary, but what you do gain is additional buffs to your character. So like you'll get an attack increase or a defense increase, and these are permanent as you go through the game. So like when your HP increases and you get another little kind of Zelda heart onto your health, it is permanent going forward. So you start off with like 4 or 5, and then by the end of the game, just like Link to the Past, you have like 20, because you've got like 2 full rows at the top. So it kind of like takes from Zelda in that sense. And it does have this one kind of puzzle element that I thought would be used a bit more, where if you hold down the shoulder button, Will does this kind of spin with his banner, his baton, that like attracts objects or like certain statues towards you. So I thought it would be used a lot more in terms of like doing puzzles where you have to move statues onto switches and things like that. But you kind of do it at the beginning of the game, and then they basically forget about it. And what I actually realized at the end of the game, I was looking up like a walkthrough afterwards, and I was like, oh shit, that you can block enemies with that thing, and I never used it to block enemies in the whole game. So like this entire mechanic that's not really explained that well to you could have been used to block stuff the whole game, and I didn't realize, and I was like, god damn it, that's really annoying, because there are certain bosses in particular that are super fucking challenging, like in a way that is I think the balance of the game difficulty wise is really good, and then like some of the bosses will come in and be like, no, no, actually, this is impossibly hard, and you're just going to have to use save states to get through it.
JRPG difficulty spike?
Yeah, I mean, it's slightly different in this case because it's more of an action RPG, right? Like with JRPGs, it's usually the kind of like, I don't know, the boss has like 7 final forms, and like you have to like manage your MP and FP and all that sort of stuff, whereas this is much more like, it's dexterity based, right? So you're dodging out of the way. Like, it does feel like Link to the Past in that way, where I know that we definitely had struggles with certain bosses. Like, remember that moth boss in Link to the Past where like the floor is moving like an escalator and there are spikes all over the walls? Like, yeah, Link to the Past is hard, and this game kind of mirrors that. There's one boss in particular, these vampires, these dual vampires in the middle of the game, who are just like, they're assholes, they're really hard to kill, and the game sets it up. So basically, there's this other aspect where when Will enters a save point, he can then also transform into a different version, basically, of himself. He becomes more powerful. He turns into this character called Freedan, and Freedan is this big knight with like long blonde flowing hair and a giant sword, and Freedan is just way more powerful than Will, because, you know, he's not a child with a stick. He's a big knight with a sword, so of course he's going to be more powerful. And so, you know, when you find him, it's always that relief, you know, in the middle of a dungeon. You're like, oh, I can transform into this dude now. Now things are going to be a lot easier because he can hit enemies from a bit further away. He can do more damage, and generally is a bit more beefy, so he can take hits a bit better. But for this vampire boss, the game had set it up so that I was going into the fight as Will, but I could go back. It was just a pain in the ass to go back to the place where I could change back to Freedan. But after a few attempts, I was like, I need to go back and transform, because it's just not going to be, you know, I'm not going to be able to get through it easily otherwise. So I did, and it made it a lot easier, and it was much better. But that was just one weird kind of like bump in the road when I was playing through the game, where I was like, well, they could have set this up better so that I would have had access to this form as you go through. There's actually a second form that you get access to, but you only get access to it in like the last dungeon of the game, which is a little bit of a weird thing, because it would have been nice to have it, because you kind of transform into this almost ethereal like flame beast enemy who uses a whip, and you can melt through the floor. Like, you can kind of like melt into a puddle, and that helps you like navigate the final dungeon, where you can melt past staircases and things into lower areas. And I think it would have been a nice flavor switch up for earlier in the game, because you get Freedan pretty early, so you can transform into the knight, like, I don't know, maybe a couple hours in. But then the whole rest of the game, there's this kind of third statue that, you know, you're expecting to get, and it doesn't happen until right at the end. So I think, I don't know what happened with development, but it would have been nice if they had kind of pace that out a little better, like had that come up a little bit more early within the game. But yeah, I do think that it really does a nice job in terms of like the balance of exploring these spaces and doing the dungeons and having the puzzles, and, you know, fighting these enemies to get more powerful. And it's cool because each character gets different abilities. So even though Freedan is much more powerful, there are certain areas he can't access. So Will, for example, can slide under small gaps because he's a little kid, so he can do the slide move where he can get into areas Freedan just can't access. And then Will also gets an ability that's this tornado, which is really weird to activate, where you have to hold down A to start doing a charge attack. There's also these whole puzzles where, like, which is interesting, where like you go up to a wall and you can get through the wall with a charge attack, but it just looks like a regular wall. But the way that you tell you can get through it is that there's wind coming through, and the wind can be seen by his hair being ruffled. So if you see the character's just kind of standing there.
That's pretty impressive for a Super Nintendo.
It is, yeah, it's really impressive actually, because it's like usually you're just, you know, in classic Zelda games, for example, you know, before they started putting cracks in the walls to see what was bombable, you just have to bomb things just to see, or hit walls to see if you can get through them. Whereas this kind of adds a little bit of that layer of, oh, you walk past an area, oh, his hair starts moving, and that kind of indicates, oh, I can use a charge move to break down this wall. But then you get this tornado move later where you have to hold down the charge button and then tap the L and R buttons to start twisting, and then hold a directional button to start moving. And this is the only way you get up certain inclines. So there are certain like slopes that he can't run up, but you can get up them if you use the tornado. And I had to look up online how to even activate this thing, because when they first say it, they're like, oh yes, use the shoulder buttons to do this thing. And I kept pressing the shoulder buttons, and all the shoulder buttons did was my kind of block telekinesis attack. And I was like, what? How the fuck? And it turns out you have to hold down the button, wait for it to fully charge, then tap left and right alternatively, then press the D-pad to move. And it's just like, some of these moves moves. Like Freedan gets another one later on, which is like, it's this kind of move that activates some souls like spinning around him that kind of does like AoE damage, but it lasts for about 1.5 seconds, and it's a really complicated input to use. So it's like, why the fuck would I ever use this? Because it barely lasts any time, and it's really hard to pull off. And it's just like, I don't know, some of the upgrades I think could have been better thought out, just with the way that I just never felt the need to use them. They're either too cumbersome to use or just like not necessary, basically. So yeah, but generally, I did really enjoy all of the dungeon stuff, and a lot of this game is that, right? The characterization stuff and the world stuff is just a bit weird and very reminiscent of what you would expect from a Super Nintendo era game, right? Where the localization is just a little iffy, and characters talk in a way that doesn't sound like full English, like it's broken in ways, like they use words that aren't really the right ones you should be using in that context. There's a lot of non sequiturs, and I don't know, it's there are some cool scenes, right? Like there's points, but it's also like really weird. It's like, oh, okay, then suddenly you're in this cave, and anyway, all you can eat is mushrooms, and you kind of go around and talk to all your characters, and then you just like stand there for a bit, and then it like fades to black, and it's like, and they were there for 1 month, and they had to live off mushrooms. Anyway, now they left the cave, and they found the top of the dungeon, and now they're out onto an island. And it's like, okay, I guess, like, we just needed to get from location to location, right? And we're using these weird, like, Incan ruins and Great Wall of China, all these places. There's a sky dungeon where you go to the, what are those in the sand, right? Like the ancient, I can't remember what race of people it was, but there are those kind of, like, big drawings in the sand that people could see from, like, the sky above. And like you go to that area, and then above it is this entire sky dungeon. Anyway, lots of real world tie-ins and stuff going on there. But yeah, there's stuff like you are suddenly stuck on in the middle of the sea on a raft, and it's you and the princess character. The first kind of location you go to is a castle, and you meet this princess character, and she has a pet pig and all this stuff, and she comes with you on your adventure, because why not? Because everyone's just coming on an adventure for no good reason. And sometimes, like, Will's friends, one of his friends just like disappears early on and is never heard from again, and the game never addresses it really. And then like they're kind of on this raft. It's just him and Kara, who's the princess, and she's like, I'm in love with you now, and he's like, yes, I think I also am. And there's no reason for this at all. It's not set up in any way. They're just like, okay, anyway, now they're in love. The same thing happens with one of Will's friends, I think called Eric, and like there's this other fairy character who turns into like a what's the when you blow a not a daffodil. What's the plant where you blow it and all the little things come out of it? You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, like I can say a dandelion.
Dandelion?
I think dandelion
yes.
is the yellow one. I think with maybe it is a dandelion.
I think dandelions are when you're a kid, you blow a dandelion, all the little bits of the dandelion go. So one of these characters turns into one of those little bits from a dandelion. She's like a magical character. That's never explained either. Okay. Anyway, Will's friend just suddenly falls in love with her, and that just becomes a thing. It's super like it's super weird. There's also stuff about like slave labor and stuff where they try and like feels like they're trying to say something. Where there's this character Neil who just wears a hoodie the whole time, but he's also an inventor, and he invents a plane so that they can fly to the sky dungeon. And then you eventually end up in his hometown, which I think that's Euro is his hometown, and his parents are there, and apparently his parents run this company, and this company is just, it's never really clear what the company does, but the company is called Rolex with a K, and it feels like it's like trying to be Rolex, like the watchmakers, but it's talking about how they just use slave labor, but it's not actually clear what the company does. All they have is slaves doing stuff, but it's not clear what like the point of the company is. And then you're in this house with him, and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna go off to this random place, and you suddenly end up in this place with mushrooms and like branches. And it's like this whole weird forest place, and you go and find a magical teapot, and you bring the teapot back and you give it to his mum, and both of his parents just then turn into ghosts, and then he's like, now I realize how much I miss my parents, and I'm going to become the next CEO of the company. Like, it's just like, none of this makes any fucking sense at all. It is such a lunacy, and like, it's clearly, I think that there was a through line here in the Japanese, but I think that at the time, the localization just really didn't know what to do with it, so it just ends up in this kind of weird, like, magical adventure that doesn't make a lot of sense. But overall, I will say that as a whole package, in terms of like location variety and the way the mechanics come together, I think this is a much better game than Soul Blazer overall. Much more interesting, a much stronger sense of place and world and everything. And I really enjoyed it. You know, like it took me a while. I was playing it handheld as well and playing it on the train here and there. It was one of those games where I did kind of want to get to a dungeon, and then on the train I could play the dungeon because there's no story stuff or dialogue to read while you're doing that stuff, so it breaks it up quite nicely, where when I'm at home, like, I just go through all the story, the town stuff, and then when I'm on the train, play through the dungeon stuff. It was a nice balance to strike, and yeah, I'm very, very glad to have played it, and now I'm set up to play Terranigma, which is, by all accounts, the best one, and also one of the best Super Nintendo games that a lot of people have said, so that kind of been my goal all along, is like, Terranigma is really the game I wanted to play, but I was really interested in the history of Quintet and how they got to this point, and it's really interesting to see how they went from Soul Blazer into Illusion of Gaia, and now I'm thinking that like they're going to take all the lessons learned, go into Terranigma, and this is where they get their magnum opus.
And the stories don't link.
No, they're all like separate worlds and everything.
Right.
So yeah, Terranigma I think is also very different and separate universe, and also probably the longest one. So yeah, I'll probably take a little bit of a break, but I will come back and eventually play Terranigma, having now finished Illusion of Gaia. But yeah, highly recommend people check this trilogy out. I really think that they should do a re-release on Switch. I feel like it's going to be.
And none of them are on Switch Online, right?
No, none of them are on Switch Online. None of them, I think, were on Virtual Console either, or maybe a couple of them were. But
and none of them were also on the SNES Classic.
No, but the fascinating thing is, like, Terranigma only ever came out in the UK. It never came out in America. Well, it came out in Europe, basically. Terranigma only was released in Europe, never in the United States. So it's one of those rare cases where, like, we never got Final Fantasy VI or Chrono Trigger over here, but we got Terranigma for some reason, and that's fascinating. But anyway, there you go. That's my Super Nintendo classic RPG niche corner. Bally, back to you for some real video games in the present day.
This isn't actually a video game. This is a Switch accessory. So it was my birthday very recently, and Caroline, I asked for this from Caroline, and she thought it was a great idea for a birthday present. So she bought me a Fixture S1. So for those who don't know what a Fixture S1 is, it's basically a chunk of plastic that physically links your Switch Pro controller to the Switch screen. And the advantage of this there's a number of reasons this is an advantage. First advantage, it means that you can use your Pro controller on the go with your Switch screen, and it feels a lot more comfortable than holding the Switch. Like I personally think the Switch it's a fairly comfortable system, but I think if you're playing like an action-driven game for long periods of time, I don't think it's the most comfortable system. I think the Pro Controller is much more comfortable, so you gain the benefit of being able to use the Pro Controller while you're on the go.
I think it also depends on hand size as well, because I know that you love the PS5 controller. For me, it's a bit too big, and so I think generally because you have larger hands, you find Switch in handheld probably a bit less comfortable than a lot of people.
I guess the other bonus of this, annoyingly, is that like it means that you're reducing your chance of Joy-Con drift by not using your Joy-Cons because you're forcing yourself to use your Pro controller.
Oh yes, get over that problem by not using the thing. Thanks Nintendo.
Now, when I found out about the Fixture S1, my immediate concern was if it's designed to be on the go, it's basically turning your Switch into something that's a lot less portable and a lot less sleek in design. So I was worried that, like, where would I stick this thing even if I did bring it with me? And I'd only want to use it when I'm playing portable because I tend to play Switch on my TV when I'm at home. So that's the great thing, is that this Fixture S1 also comes with a carrying case. Now the carrying case basically has indents for your Pro controller, and then the whole screen, you can basically fold the thing flat where you've got the Pro controller and then the Fixture S1 in between, folded flat with the screen attached, and then the whole thing goes into like this protected zip up case, like it's one of those reinforced kind of cases. And I don't think it's not sleek, it's not thin, but it is all contained, and you can just chuck that into like a suitcase or your rucksack, and it is all in one thing, and you can immediately unzip it and get it out, and it's ready to go, all pre-attached. So like I think it's actually it's not as portable as a Switch, but I think to get that like comfortable playing on the go with a Pro Controller, I think it's absolutely awesome. And I should also say that it connects to the Switch on the points at which the Joy-Con would attach, so on the sides of the Switch. And that means that all the ports, all the like fan and all the airflow is completely exposed. So you can connect anything, whether it's headphones, a charger. Like for example, if I was on like an 8-hour flight or something, I would bring my Anker like chargeable dock, and that could still plug in while I'm playing with using the Fixture S1. Like that port isn't covered up in any way whatsoever. So it's really well designed in that sense, and it actually feels really comfortable. It is quite heavy because you are attaching a Pro Controller to your Switch screen, but you are able to adjust the screen in a way where you can make sure that the force is at like its optimal angle, as it were, where if your wrists are feeling it too much in this angle, you can adjust it so that it's going more like kind of down into your body, say if you've got it like sitting on your lap. And I've not used it for more than like 20 minutes, half an hour just at home, but I am going on a trip to like Loch Lomond at the start of June. So I'm really looking forward to like trying it out and, you know, playing on the go, because I think it's a really, really great bit of kit that just kind of makes gaming on the go. It just looks like, it makes you look a bit like a gaming pro, in my opinion. Like it makes you look a bit like, right, this is how you properly play a Switch when you're on the go. So I'm looking forward to properly trying it out. And I should also say this Fixture S2, I believe, is coming out or has come out this summer. And I'm not entirely sure what the differences are, or whether it's like just like a very minor update, but that's also out.
I think maybe that one was specifically for the OLED, because I know that OLED has slightly different dimensions, so maybe that's what it is.
Yeah,
that would make sense. But yeah, this thing seems really cool. It makes me want to get that thing where, you know, like people are in bed and they have a thing that like attaches the Switch to like this kind of hovering almost overhang where you can lie down in bed and have the Switch kind of like on top of you as you play, like lying down. That is kind of what it makes me think about. But yeah, I'm sure this will be
it's very
good.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. It's good for bedtime Switch playing, although since like Bally Jr.'s been born, like we've not had any time like just chilling in bed. Like it's just that time is completely evaporated. So like I spend like 5 minutes just waking up and then getting up. So I'm not able to play Switch for long periods of time in bed, unfortunately. But those days are not with me at the moment. But yeah,
that's all right. They'll come back at some point, I'm sure. But Bally, you've been playing something else that is hopefully going to come to Switch that I talked about on a show when you were away. But since then, you have been diving deep into Tunic.
Yes.
So yeah, this has been fun because you've basically been like texting me updates every time you play this game. And it's one of those games where you kind of like have to do that in a way, but also like I think it's a fun way to play the game because it is full of secrets, right? As we talked about, like it is a game that is rich with, like, it doesn't tell you what to do really, and you just kind of have to figure shit out. So
it's full of secrets at every level, and I love that about it, where, you know, when the game starts, you're expecting like this kind of cutscene and you're going to be this fox and this is your journey and the first point you have to go to is here, and it's not like that at all. It's very much just go and do your thing, go explore, go do whatever, and you're like, right, okay, I have absolutely no idea where I'm going. I'm just going to run around this overworld, and okay, I picked up a page in this book. Oh, it's mentioning something about like an eastern forest. I guess that's off to the east. I'll go east. Oh, it's got like this sign saying like the sword is here, so I guess that might be a sword. And you're just kind of like, that's a very obvious, simple puzzle, and that represents like the opening of the game. But then it just kind of ramps up from there, where you're unlocking parts of this guidebook that, I mean, it's more an instruction manual than it is a guidebook. It's very much an instruction manual, and the instruction manual has a ton of information at different points and different layers to kind of like work out, and a lot of the instruction manuals in a different language, so you're forced to kind of like very much reference points and put points together and try to work out where you're going and how it all connects. And that's all separate to the fact that just mechanically and world design wise, it's such a dense, well-designed Zelda world. Like it's not a particularly large world, and you definitely find yourself returning to areas frequently because these areas have so many layers to them. You very much are returning to areas and find, oh, there's actually this thing here that links to this that does this. And as you're piecing it together, it's just this incredible level of satisfaction. And I'm very particular when it comes to like my very puzzle focused games. And for like the main game, less so maybe the post game stuff, but for the main game, like this really was exactly my level of kind of like puzzle and working out where to go next. And I felt very satisfied in not having to go to a guide at all, really, and just really working out, right, the instruction manual suggesting this and working out this. And that's even on top of the fact that I think mechanically, I don't think the combat is immaculate, but I think the combat is very good. Like, I think that it's got like this is very stamina focused, which can be tricky because essentially when you run out of stamina, your character takes a hell of a lot of damage. So it's about managing that meter. So I just think it's got all this, like, all the puzzles aside, I think it's a solid Zelda game. But when you layer in the instruction manual and the puzzles and the secrets of the world, it's an unbelievably impressive, it's like one of the most impressive games I've ever played. Like, it is so incredibly immaculate in the way that it's been designed. And no wonder this game took so long to design. I know it was made by one guy, but like, it is so unbelievably carefully crafted that it just feels like an absolute luxury to play and just to poke around and work out where are we going, where's next. And there's some really, like, it's not got an overt story. It's very much a like piece it together kind of what's going on in this world. And there's some really impressive areas and reveals that I was like, wow, this game is really dark, actually. Like,
yeah,
there's a
for
lot
sure.
Really like, oh my god, that's what's going on here. Okay, right. And there's just so many like hooks that just really grab you. And I have had such a great time with this game. I'm kind of in the end game. I can take on the final boss, and you've told me that if I take on the final boss, I'll reach the bad ending. But likewise, I can get the bad ending and then continue to play more game to get the good ending, which is what I plan to do. So it's a hell of a game. I am so glad I'm playing this game. It is, I mean, I feel like this game was talked about a lot when it came out, but I feel like it's dropped off a lot, and I really hope more people play this and talk about it, because this is like, it really is like my jam when it comes to like this type of game. It is so impressive.
Yeah, and I was very impressed as well, the level to which you were able to get through a lot of this early game stuff and figure things out, like not having to go to a guide, because I certainly did for multiple points, and there's especially like near the end of the game where things get really convoluted, and we had like a long call where I was like kind of like trying to nudge you in the right directions, but also not like overtly say anything. And I mean, some of those end game things are really hard to figure out, you know, I'll just be honest about it. But I think it's this really fun thing where I want you to have the moment of revelation that I did, and not like give you too much, but like trying to lean you in the right direction, because the big puzzle of that game is one of my favorite things in a game. Like the moment I'd figured out what was going on and started to piece it together, I was like, you know, the last 6 hours, as I mentioned on the show, like, of this game were just, I couldn't think about anything else. Like, I would go to bed, like, and Tunic would be in my dreams, and then I'd wake up and be like, right, end of like, lunchtime today, I need to go do this. And then as soon as I finished work, I was like, okay, need to get my piece of paper, start scrawling things on here, doing all these fucking end game puzzles that are like true nonsense, and like everything that was hidden in plain sight across the entire overworld. Like, you had one of those moments where you walked into an area and you looked at something and you were like, oh, you know, like you're like, oh, and now you're gonna look at the entire world in that same way.
And you're almost like the puzzles have a real language to them. Like, it's a real style, and you realize, oh wait, that's kind of what they're going for. And like, I remember messaging you like, I think you do this by doing this, and you're like, okay, right. And I'm like, oh wow, it actually worked. And those moments, there's a very like unique puzzle to video games. I think this would be very hard to carry out necessarily through like a board game or something else. Like, it's a very like, right, how does this represent that? And boom, here we go. Okay, right. And even on top of all these secrets we've talked about, there's even more secrets, and like this game just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And like I'm sure this is the sort of game that in like 15 years time someone will be like, I've discovered the final Tunic secret, because there's just so many layers to like what's going on and how.
Yeah, I'm waiting for that Jacob Geller video essay on the last true secret in Tunic, in 10 years time.
Exactly. And as a secrets game, it's fantastic. As a purely Zelda game, it's very, very good. But I think once you layer on those secrets on top of the fact that it's a very strong Zelda game, this is like one of the best games in that genre like I think I've ever played. Like it's so good. And I think in the same way that people argue Breath of the Wild revolutionized what 3D Zelda could do, like I think this is like the answer to like 2D Zelda. This is like the spiritual successor to kind of a lot of those ideas that the original Zelda went for, where it is a lot less handholdy and a lot more, even the more obscure. Like I struggle more with the obscure puzzles in Zelda than I did with some of the obscure stuff in this game. Weirdly, like I kind of just knew what to do and where to go next. Not including the end game stuff, because that's much harder, but like the main game stuff, I just kind of got that feel as to what to do and how to do it in this game.
You just intuit it almost.
Yeah, and I think that is honestly just down to the design. I think it is so cleverly crafted, and it's just chef's kiss for like video game design and care put into like this world, because it is just so impeccable. And yeah, I love the size of the world, how it's dense and it's complicated, but it's manageable. It feels like I still have a reference point in my head for like every single area of that game and vaguely how to navigate your way around it. Because there are some areas I would do before I even got the map, and then I'd come back later with the map and find out more stuff. And it's like that satisfaction is quite rare in games these days. And we've not even like mentioned the sheer awesomeness of the art style of the instruction book itself. Just as a piece of art, I think it is just a very well designed book, and the sound design, the flipping through pages and stuff, like it feels like a real instruction manual. Like it's just so nicely done.
But also you can zoom in and see the texture on the pages, as well as like the biro pen in which the person who has previously owned this has written into it, and it feels like they legit went in there and just drew it on with a pen.
It's a really, really special game. And I think if you're someone who really enjoys 2D Zelda, and especially the kind of trickier puzzle aspects of 2D Zelda, like this is maybe the best game in that genre ever. And that's awesome to see. So yeah, I'm looking forward to finishing some more of the secrets, and I can maybe talk about them vaguely next time. I've still got this final boss to beat my head against and get through. But I can check in next time. But yeah, Tunic, awesome. My goodness, what a game.
Fantastic. Let's close things out with one last game that I think has very cool puzzles as well, but maybe doesn't quite stick the landing by the end of the game. And that is Toodee and Topdee. And this game is...
best name ever.
It's really cool. It is the concept behind this was just, as soon as I saw it, I was like, that's an awesome idea for a game. The idea is that you play these two characters, and you can actually play in co-op as well, where one person plays one character and one person plays the other, and I don't know how that affects like puzzle solving and things like that, but you play as a character who lives in a 2D land, which means like Mario, side-scrolling, jumping, all that sort of stuff, and you have a character called Topdee who lives in a kind of more Link to the Past Zelda style top-down world, where he can move all across the overworld, like in moving isometrically, let's say, and each character has their own abilities. So 2D is able to jump on top of objects and get to places by doing platforming, whereas Topdee is able to move around anywhere. When 2D is like on the ground, he can only jump a certain height. Topdee can like walk on the ceiling basically, because he can just...
Quite difficult to describe in a podcast, but just look up a quick trailer and you'll get it immediately.
Exactly, yes. So he's able to kind of walk around the whole space, and all of these are basically one screen puzzles where you'll see the screen and you'll have both characters on screen and you can switch between them basically. So Topdee can, for example, here's a great example of a puzzle early on, is 2D needs to get up to the end point where you kind of warp out the level, but it's high up on a platform, and the only way to get there is this block that he can jump on, but the block isn't high up enough for him to jump off of it to get to the platform. So what you do is you jump onto the platform, you switch to the other character, and you move the block. Actually, first of all, what you do is you jump onto the block, then you start jumping as Toodee, and then in the middle of your jump, you switch over, and then the other character, Topdee, comes, picks up that block, moves it to underneath where you're going to land, and then you switch back and you land on top of it. And it's just such a cool idea of this kind of like pausing thing where like you'll be mid-jump, but the other character will be able to pick up an object and put it underneath you so that you can complete that. It's an awesome concept, and I think it does it really smartly for the first 3 worlds or so. So the first 3 worlds you go through and you'll have lots of different puzzle elements. One of my favorite ones is there are these pigs, and the pigs kind of like move back and forth on platforms, but as soon as you switch to Topdee, they can move anywhere as well, so they just start chasing after him. And so an early puzzle with this is that you need to get across to this area, but there's a pig like on a platform, and you're going to die as Toodee if you go there. So what you do is you switch to Topdee, and you bait the pig so that it's almost over the top of a spike pit, and then you switch back to Toodee, and this pig is now in free fall and just falls onto the spike pit and dies, right? So it's this really clever manipulation of elements in these 2 dimensions in order to progress and make things happen. And I think for me, this game kind of really crystallized what works in puzzle games and what doesn't, because I think the smartest thing that puzzle games can do is, once as a player you have figured out what to do, the execution of it shouldn't be the tricky part, right? Like, so as soon as you figure out, okay, I need to do this in order to cause this to happen, therefore I can get through this area. The execution for me always has to be easy and understandable and not give you any friction. And I think that's sometimes where this game fumbles, is that you get to situations where you kind of have to be precise with the platforming and very specific with the way you move. And that's where I find it's tricky, because you'll know exactly what you have to do, but actually executing it becomes the hard part. And then when you mess it up, you have to reset everything. And that's the other aspect of puzzle games I think could be refined. Like if you have a game where there's a lot of setup involved and you need to like do all these certain things, the very feeling of setting all that stuff up, taking a long time to do it because it's a puzzle game, it's methodical, and then messing up one step of it and having to go all the way back to the beginning, it's really demoralizing, right? Because you know what to do, you've had to spend so much time setting it all up, so that going back to the beginning, you just have to spend all that time setting up again. You know what to do, you know how to do this, but if you mess up the execution at the last moment, that's where it falters, right? And that's where it becomes a real frustration. And when you get to the 4th world of this game, not only does it really ramp up the difficulty of the puzzles in a case of like making it really hard to figure them out, but also once you figure them out, it's like, well, this just feels, it almost feels like it's not as polished, or like I'm not doing this in the exact right way, because it almost feels like I'm kind of fudging it to get this thing to happen, and it's not as clean or as streamlined as you want. Like I think of a game like the Gardens Between or Gorogoa, where both those games I think excel because the input and the way in which you solve puzzles is very simplified, and there's no real execution that is needed. Whereas in a puzzle platformer like this, where there are platforming elements, it's harder to achieve that. And so even though it is extremely clever, and I think it is so good for those first few worlds, when it gets to the end, it just gets a little bit frustrating in a way that I didn't appreciate. But what I will say is that the game has a lot of accessibility options, which means you can go in there, you can change it so that you don't die in one hit, which is the base default, is you die in one hit, basically, with any character. You can change it to have infinite health. You can make it so that when you're playing as Toodee, you can infinite jump. So if you're getting frustrated with a timing-based part of a puzzle, you can just infinite jump your way up to get something. There's lots of things in there just to make it so that if you know what to do, but it's frustrating to do it, you can just kind of bypass it, which is really nice. But I think like ultimately they should have designed the puzzle a little bit better instead of forcing me to resort to that, that's kind of where I come down on it. But it is nice that it has that option, and it means that you can kind of get through it if you have those issues. But what I will say is that the ending is really cool, and they do something really cool at the ending, so it's worth it to get through it. So I wouldn't say like it's the kind of game where you get to world 4 and then give up, because I think it's worth pushing through the really hard puzzles to get to that last section, because that last section does an incredibly cool thing, and I loved it, and I thought it was a great end cap to the whole idea of the game and what they were building towards, and thought it was really brilliant. So yeah, it's a really unique really just great concept for a puzzle game, just really stands out. And I think if they had a bit more time to like think about those end game puzzles, because what it feels like is there's this nice ramp up in difficulty, and then there's just this huge spike that happens, and then the end game happens, and the spike kind of disappears and goes down again. And yeah, it just would have been nice to see that. But I totally feel like on another go this, they can really refine it and make it truly one of the best puzzle games, because honestly those first 3 worlds I was smitten with this. I was like, Bally, you got to buy this. This is an excellent, like one of the best puzzle games I've played in a long time. And yeah, it's unfortunate it kind of like fumbles at the end, but yeah, I do still think this is really worth picking up and playing. And you can get it on Switch. I had played it on Steam. I actually got a review code for it. So yeah, you should check out Toodee and Topdee.
When did it come out?
It came out, I think, end of last year, or like maybe a kind of September-ish sometime last year. But it's available on Switch now, and that's a great place to play it. A great platform, of course. So
cool.
Do give it a go. And yeah, as Bally said, look up a video for it, because I think that does a better job of illustrating what's going on, a lot better than I can in words on a podcast. So there you go. All right, well, that is going to close us out for this part of the show. We'll be back after the break to return to the Jukebox. See you in a bit. All right, everybody, welcome back to the second half of today's show. It's time to get musical, get jiggy with it, with some music in the Jukebox segment, and I'll get Bally to explain it. But before we do that, we're not doing emails this week. However, people did send in a bunch of emails, so thanks everybody. We actually got a good amount in, but that doesn't mean that the faucet wants to be stopping anytime soon. We love to hear from new folks, and a bunch of new people wrote in, so if you've never written in before, please go ahead and do so, and we'll get to your emails eventually at some point, quite soon, because I'm sure we'll be taking some more. But Bally, where can they send those emails to?
Please send your emails to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We are in need of more.
Of course, as always. But yes, thank you to everyone who has written in since our last call. Sweet. Well, Bally, we're going to be doing the Jukebox. Do you want to explain this for people who haven't been around for a while and haven't heard us do this before?
So, I have prepared 5 songs from video games, and these are video games that MEZ has played. And all these video games are playable on Nintendo systems. That's not to say MEZ necessarily played them on Nintendo systems, but they are playable on Nintendo systems. And MEZ has to tell me the game that the song is from. He doesn't have to tell me the name of the song, but that's extra knowledge. If he wants to show that off, go for it. And then, last time we did, so we've done this now 11 times. And last time, the 11th time, you tested me, MEZ, and I got 1 out of 5. You went in brutal. And that was back in episode 192. So it's been 60 weeks, apparently. So
wow, Jesus. Okay.
So yeah, I've prepped 5 songs. And we should say that games that have been done in Jukebox are never repeated. So these are 5 games that have never been mentioned before in Jukebox. So yeah. Are we ready to begin?
I think we are. I think, Bally, without further ado, let's listen to song number 1. Okay, so I'm going to talk you through my emotions. So I feel like this started out with like kind of heroic, kind of like light fairy tale vibes, kind of mock epic almost. And I was like, okay, this has to be some kind of like Zelda adjacent game. I was thinking, okay, could it be Hyper Light Drifter? But Hyper Light Drifter is a bit darker in tone, doesn't have quite as many of those vibes going on. Then I thought it's kind of like painterly almost. I was like, I know what this is. This is Grease, and I was ready to tell you that's what it is. But in the meantime, while I was listening, I looked up the list of games we used, and I realised that you already used Grease on me last time. So now I'm like, oh shit. Okay, I need to come up with another option here. Because I don't think it's that. It does feel like it is a indie game. It feels like a Switch indie that has a kind of whimsy to it almost. And I'm trying to think like what has there been that we played that I think is kind of whimsical, that has that vibe to it, but I think works. And the thing that just came to my brain was The Wild at Heart, which is a Pikmin style game, indie game that's really cool that we played last year, and has that kind of foresty vibe to it. Like there are moments where it gets dark and things like that, and I can't really remember the music of it that well, but that felt to me like the kind of almost light springiness that you get from that type of thing. Any other guess? I'm not really sure. Like there's definitely I really do feel like this is a Switch indie. That's kind of what my gut feeling is. So I'm just gonna say it. I'm gonna go ahead and say that this is The Wild at Heart, and it might be wrong, but I'm just gonna throw it out as a guess.
Okay, is that your final answer?
Yes, it's my final answer.
That is incorrect.
Damn it.
I like your logic.
Okay.
This is Spiritfarer.
Oh, of course it is.
It's
Yes.
the Thunder Harvest. So
yeah,
so you like harvest thunder in that game, and it's like its own little mini game, and the mini game's fine, like you're platforming around, but I think the best part of the mini game is this song, where it's just like this thematic, and the lightning storm comes and the rain, and
I think the fact that there wasn't any lightning sound, that would have obviously given it to me. But I think if I'd heard that, that would have really centered me in like, because when you hear this song, that is very clearly like alongside it is that noise, you know?
Yeah. Spiritfarer just has an unbelievably good soundtrack. I think it is something not talked about enough, is just the strength of indie soundtracks, especially in like the last 7 years. It is just phenomenal, some of the songs in these games. And I thought Spiritfarer was just an incredible game, but reinforced by an incredible soundtrack.
Yeah, there's definitely songs from it that I think are very memorable. I wouldn't say this is one that I would immediately, obviously I didn't identify it, so that's clearly the case, but there's a lot, because you are spending so much time on the boat just going between places, there's a lot of like kind of low vibesy, kind of like chill style music going on often, and it's really great for the feel of the game, but I wouldn't say like I would listen to it outside unless I was like, you know, writing or something, or wanted something in the background that was chill and calming. I wouldn't say it's like identifiable as much so as some other things out there, but I think the style is actually quite recognizable. As soon as you said it, I was like, of course, that's the real style of most of this soundtrack.
A lot of flute in that game, like a lot.
Yes.
Like, you really notice it.
Yeah, I mean, I was along the similar lines with the Switch indie, and that was correct. It was just...
I think Wild at Heart was a very good guess, actually.
Yes.
I think, yeah, definitely a lot of flute in that game as well.
There's a lot of kind of similar vibes going on there as well. You know, I think both games deal with dark topics and dark subjects, obviously, and there are kind of moments of melancholy there, but this one is more like not completely heroic, but like has that kind of optimistic bent to it, you know, like you're achieving something. And yeah, I mean, I adore Spiritfarer. I do think it has a really great soundtrack, but it's a good pick because it's not one that I would instantly recognize, but as soon as you say it, I'm like, yes, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I believe they added a bunch of stuff to that game, didn't they? They did some DLC, like characters and things, so it might be one to go back to.
DLC on Game Pass?
I think it might be actually, because it's free. I believe it was all free DLC, so it's free update. So
yeah. Cool. MBZ, are you ready for song number 2?
Let's do it. All right, that's that's hard. That's really tricky. I don't have an immediate one that has come to mind, but let's talk through it. So we got some kind of like rock vibes here. There's like kind of a little bit of metal in there. Like it feels like something kind of Mega Man-esque adjacent. Like I could see it being a kind of side-scrolling platformer that has that kind of vibe to it, but something more modern than that, that kind of fits that mode. The other thing that came to mind for some reason was like exploring a dungeon in a Persona game, like that kind of almost you wouldn't expect it to be there, but that's the kind of music that's there. So I'm thinking along the lines of like either some kind of RPG dungeon crawly thing or some side-scrolling action game. And it has like a almost background. I would maybe lean on the lines of something like a Xenoblade if I didn't know those soundtracks so well, and I'm pretty certain that doesn't appear in either of them unless it's like one of the Menace songs. But also I'm pretty sure I will have done Xenoblade as a part of this before, so I don't think that will come into it. That's probably a safe bet.
Just looking at the document, Xenoblade Chronicles is the other.
Yeah.
Xenoblade.
So you could have chose Xenoblade 2, but I know that generally you don't choose things you haven't played. That's not a hard and fast rule, but yeah, I don't think there's anything adjacent there. I think there's RPG is definitely like potential here. There's, I guess, like something like Shimigami, the Tokyo Mirage Sessions game, like almost maybe has that feel to it. Maybe that's the vibe I'm getting, because like going through a dungeon like that. But I don't know if you choose that. I don't know. It's a really hard one. This is very, very difficult. I'm stretched thing.
Do you want any clues?
Yeah, if you want to give me a clue that doesn't ruin it or spoil it, or just hints me in a direction, that would be good.
I've not played this game.
Okay, all right. Well, okay, that makes things a little bit easier then, because I can branch out into those directions. Maybe I'm just going to go with it, because I think that's kind of what my gut was telling me when I was imagining this. It kind of gave me the sense of going around a dungeon, and I think that being not many Persona things on Switch or on Nintendo platforms generally, I'm going to say Tokyo Mirage Session Sharp FE is the answer, Bally. Am I right?
Is that your final answer?
Lock it in, baby.
That is incorrect.
Ah!
It is Astral Chain.
Shit! That was the other one.
So it's Maison Forest's Midnight Combat phase. So like I checked a lot of these songs, and a lot of them just sounded much of a muchness to me, and I thought if he's going to get this, he's going to get it based on like the style of this music, because a lot of these songs, it's a real metal electronic, but like synthesized. I don't know what other words to use to describe it, but like quite rhythmical as well. Like they sounded very similar. And you're right, I thought you would guess like Xenoblade, but I thought no. MBZ knows his Xenoblade too well, so he'll know that this isn't Xenoblade, and then he'll go for Astral Chain. But then you started throwing in those other games, so I thought, oh, well, maybe he's a bit off. But yeah.
I mean, I think it's adjacent. You know, I think that there's a you can draw a line between Astral Chain and Shin Megami Tensei Crossed Fire Emblem, otherwise known as Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE. Thanks Nintendo for that name. But yeah, Astral Chain is a great game. Actually, it's one that I think I often forget about. That's on Switch, that a lot of people. Not that many people played, but I do think doesn't get recommended as much. You know, when you think about new people buying Switch, there's not many people out there shouting about Astral Chain. And honestly, like one of the great things about this game is how good it looks, just generally on the system, but also how good it looks handheld. I have really good memories of playing this on the plane over to America when we went to Ali T's wedding, and having my power bank plugged in and just playing with the Pro Controller. Fixture S1 would have been good for that flight for certain. But yeah, I really enjoyed this game and think it has a lot of cool elements to it, like just the world and the setting and the character design and all that sort of stuff.
Did it sell okay? Will it ever get a sequel?
I think it did all right, and I think it was almost like when they revealed Bayonetta 3 gameplay for the first time, a lot of people were like, is it Astral Chain? Because they throw in the character there, the mascot character, the Lappy, who's the dog, the police dog, and that character is in Bayonetta 3's kind of teaser, and as a result,
it's such a
there's platinum, right? So they made, they're just trying to troll people, I guess, with the reveal. But I think the fact that Lappy made it into Bayonetta 3's teaser, it maybe hints the fact that they will do a second Astral Chain, I think it's definitely possible.
Just had the asset lying around, let's throw it in there, it'll be fun.
Yeah, it's a fun nod to people who have played both games, and also confusing them, because they're trying to build suspense and tension with what the reveal is, and I think it worked really well. So, this game has a really cool mechanic where you have these kind of these monsters that are chained to you, and you end up basically using them to kind of ensnare other enemies, so you can like wrap your chain around other enemies and do damage to them that way. And really cool like second control stuff where you're holding down the other stick to kind of move them around the arena. And yeah, it works really nicely in concept and in practice, and the action's really good. And I will say the music is probably more of a background thing. Like as I kind of think back on you know, what we just listened to, it very much is that kind of mechanical, rhythmical, like futuristic city vibe, you know? So it definitely fits with the tone of the game that it's going for, and is not like standout. I would say like the biggest standout song for me was the one they used in the trailer. Like that's a great song, and was kind of tricked me into actually thinking it was Xenoblade the first time we saw Astral Chain because of the music and because of the designs and stuff like that. It's interesting, like you thought I would think Xenoblade because there is like a weird tie-in to the first time I saw Astral Chain. I thought it could be a Monolith Soft project. So definitely a good pick there. Really good game. I don't know if you'd love it, but I think it's one that I think people should.
Well, I'm going to play
check
Bayonetta
out.
2 this year, and if I love that and I'm like dying for some more, might give it a go.
Yeah, I think I have it physical as well, so I could probably lend it to you. So
Sweet.
Yeah. Anyway, Astral Chain, great choice, Bally. Let's do song number 3. As soon as it started playing, I'm like, I know, I've heard this. This is like been in my brain. I have heard this. I definitely have to know what this is. And then it was the struggle of like, what the fuck is it? What is it?
I heard some swearing during the song.
Oh my god, I think, and I don't want to see if I say this and I get it wrong, I'm going to feel bad because I'm pretty sure what it is. I'm not 100% certain because I think there are more identifiable songs in this game that I would get. But also, if it is, then I'm pretty certain what it is. So I'm just going to say, I think this is Eastward. I'm pretty sure it's Eastward. I'm like 95% sure. And if I'm wrong, I'm going to get very annoyed because I know I've heard this. And I know this sounds so fucking familiar. So I'm just going to go and I'm going to say it's Eastward. And please don't be wrong.
Eastward, final answer?
Yes.
That is incorrect.
Fuck! I knew it.
I think your Eastward guest is actually fascinating because it combines like that guitar with the synth, and you're right, Eastward does that a ton.
I've heard this so recently. Give me a second. Can I? Oh my god! I
keep
going.
You
Oh man!
negative,
I know. I'm not going to get a point. I'm not going to get a point. But I definitely have heard this. I feel like that was the bad guess because I feel like I've heard this a lot more recently than Eastward. It feels like something that has come out within the last
came out the same year as Eastward.
Oh, same year. Okay.
Which was last year.
Oh man, yeah. So definitely a Switch indie game that has like similar vibes, but not exactly the same. Fuck. I'm gonna kick myself, aren't I? As soon as you say it, I'm gonna be like, I knew it. I knew that's what it was.
It's also the main theme to this game.
Yeah. Bally, I don't think I have a guess. I know I'm gonna know it as soon as you say it to me, but tell me what the fucking game is.
It's Unpacking.
Oh, of course it is. Yeah. Of course it is. God damn it. I was actually trying to listen to the Eastwood soundtrack while I was listening to that to see, and I was getting more and more unsure as I went through because none of the songs were that song, and so that's why I was But yeah, Unpacking. It's got a very chill soundtrack, chill vibes, but actually is a similar vibe to Eastwood in terms of its sound. So I get why I would mix it up.
Yeah, I hadn't even put those two together, but then when you guess it as Eastwood, I was like, wow, yeah, this does sound like Eastwood. But
it does, yeah. Out of context, it certainly does. But I think the other thing about Eastwood is like I do know that soundtrack very distinctively. So it was the best. It was the best guess I had, and I think like it just didn't quite land.
Eastwood's one of those games where because there are so few areas, I don't actually think the game has an insane number of different songs. So the songs that are in the game, I feel like we know quite well because we're quite...
I think I know that soundtrack pretty well, so I probably shouldn't have guessed it, but I couldn't think of anything else. So
whereas Unpacking, like other than the main theme, I really wasn't getting any of the other songs, but I thought, right, that main theme is very clear because I think the main theme just plays during the opening title sequence, but then it also plays through, like, I believe the first level, like it just keeps going. But yeah, cool.
Continues on. Yeah, Unpacking definitely a game that I would say a lot of its vibes can come from the music when you're kind of moving things about. I guess a lot of its kind of memorability for me comes from the sound design as well, and the sound effects of putting things in drawers and opening things up and having the door close on a drawer that's not fully shut and then it bumps against it, all that sort of stuff that sticks with me. And I don't know, there must be music that happens in the main levels as you play them. I guess I don't have as strong a memory of those.
There is. I don't think that music is overly memorable. I think that's why I went for the main theme. I thought it was a way of picking Unpacking while going for something slightly easier. But
I think all those tracks are a bit more sparse, like they have a bit more empty space in them so that you can have that kind of more laid back, chilled vibes to it. And it's a good pick. I like Unpacking a great deal, and I'm now ashamed because I messed it up. So anyway, what are you going to do? Cool. Should we move on to number 4?
Let's go for number 4.
Alright, so very piano focused, had a very gothic-y vibe to it, but not overly gothic, there was a bit of optimism in there, and I would say the first thing that came to my mind was something Castlevania adjacent, and so thinking of like a more modern game that is Bloodstained, so I think that's kind of where my mind has just gone to initially. The only thing is, I don't know if I recognize that as Bloodstained music, because I think a lot of Bloodstained music, from my recollection, is a bit more upbeat, a bit more kind of like, you know, you're moving through this space and there's kind of dynamism to it, and this feels like a bit too laid back maybe for that, unless there's a specific area you go through that plays this. There's almost like a kind of narrative to this song that makes me feel like it's not going to be that, but I don't really have another guess that kind of works on that same level. Have you played this game? Is this one that you
have played this game.
Okay, so you have played Bloodstained, so that kind of like... I think
your theory on the narrative thing is warm.
Okay, in that case, it has to be something that focuses less on kind of action stuff, and I'm going to say it's not Bloodstained in that case. So what could this be?
It's not Bloodstained.
Okay, good. That's good to know. I'm just struggling because I don't think that I've really heard this before. I probably heard it within the game itself, but is there something that is a bit more narrative, that has a bit more of a kind of somber vibe to it? The only thing that's coming to mind right now is If Found, that we recently played. That is quite recent, and I don't recognize that as the style of music from If Found. If Found has like slightly different vibe to it.
This happens at a narrative moment, and when it happens, personally made me feel quite sad. It's like a twist, and it makes you go like, oh god, okay, right, and then
boy,
this song ensues.
Oh man, okay. I think it has to be some kind of more modern game in that case, and I'm just really at a loss to what it could be. I think we've used stuff like Celeste in the past, and I don't think it works there. I don't think it fits the style of Lena Raine's music either. Yeah, this is very tricky to kind of work my head around.
I also want to say this is my favorite song out of these 5.
Oh, really? Okay.
I really think this is a really good song.
That's interesting, because I just don't recall that I've ever heard this before. So yeah, I there's not a lot coming to my brain. I think I would say something like To the Moon, but I know that soundtrack too well, and you've also not played it yet, so that doesn't quite work. Think of like emotional moments in games, in Nintendo games on Nintendo systems. It has to be some sort of indie thing out there.
I mean, I found it an emotional moment. You might have just been like, whatever.
Yeah. You know how I am. I just skip, text and dialogue all the time within games. So I really don't have much of a clue. Let's pick something out of the bag. Death's Door? I'm just going to say that because I know you like that game, and this game has really good music, but this is quite different from anything in that game. It's usually quite bombastic, and I didn't really connect with the story of that game the same way that you did. So using that deductive logic, I'm going to say Death's Door is my guess. Bally, am I right or wrong?
Is that your final answer?
Lock it in, baby.
That is correct.
Fuck yes! I can't believe the one that I recognize the least is the one I get right. Great.
So
perfect.
There's minor spoilers for Death's Door if you really do care about the story, but I'm sure there's many people who play that game who won't care about the story. But this is the Grey Crow. So this is a boss fight near the end, and it's the crow that's guarding like the final door or whatever, and the crow basically goes mad and turns on you, and this is the song that plays during that boss fight.
I think because of the intensity of that boss fight, the music just washed over me.
It is an intense boss fight, but I think what's cool about this boss fight is that music doesn't really sound like a boss fight.
It doesn't at all, no.
That music sounds like a kind of sad tale about a crow that's kind of gone mad and turned against you, and I think that's what's so with that is that like melancholic just sound. And there are positives because like this crow was an ally of the crow you play as or whatever, so you're right, it's got that happy and sad, but mainly sad kind of sound, and just like this crazy nice like just piano all the way up and down. I love it. I think it's so good.
I think it works really well with the stark black and white of that arena.
Yes.
Like it is this pure white space with nothing else in it,
really
and
cool.
the black kind of like outline of yourself as this tiny crow, and the huge enormous one that's attacking you is it's very distinctive visually, and I think that's what is most memorable to me about it, less so the music, I think, just because of the intensity of the fight. But I think actually thinking about it now, like the contrast of that is really nice, you know, like having such an intense fight with such a melancholic kind of track over the top of it. It's pretty iconic. It's probably one of the best moments of that game. Like for me, the boss fights were the best part of Death's Door, like bar none. It was really excellent stuff.
And I think the music in Death's Door is actually incredible. Like I think it's a very impressive soundtrack. Again,
there's one song that you could have played that I would have instantly got it, which is where you drop into those areas where
Avarice. Yeah, I wanted to use that, but I was like, that's way too easy. Then I found this song.
Oh, so I would have instantly, like, I would have got it on note 1. You know, like Hurdle that everyone's doing now, which is the audio version of Wordle. There are some songs that you like. There was I did it one day and it was Rage Against the Machine, Killing the Name, and like you get that within the first like instant. as soon as it's like Durr, you just instantly know what it is. So like Avarice is one of those songs where the like you instantly know it. So cool. Death's Door. Well, there you go. Well, this is the thing, Bally. This game really just comes down to logic as opposed to raw emotion, because my emotions have gotten in the way of me getting these right, whereas my logic has proved out.
Yeah, the hefty few clues in there. There we go. That's what you need.
Yeah, I did. The clues did help, I will say. So there you go. Cool. Well, let's do the last one. Let's move on to song number 5. Alright, much shorter one. Also, I heard in the middle like a little edit there of the beginning.
Yeah, it's looped. I didn't loop it, but the where I got it off YouTube, it was looped.
Yeah, the guy on YouTube did a very bad job looping that. Very clearly you can see the seams there. But a 20-second loop means that this has to be something like either old or like very old. I don't know. Like that's a kind of like, do they do 20-second loops in games anymore? I don't know. It has a kind of a almost fantasy tint to it to some degree. It made me think, maybe because of Rogue Legacy 2 is out, made me think like Rogue Legacy 1 maybe is an option, but I think it's too short for that. The sound quality is decent, so like it doesn't necessarily have to be that old either. I really don't have any guesses here, if I'm honest with you. I think that this is probably something that has to be, I'm going to say it's maybe a bit too advanced for regular Game Boy, so it could be Game Boy Advance potentially, or even DS. I still think that era had some shorter sound loops going on. There's a lot of like RPGs and kind of action games around those systems and during that time period. I guess like 3DS download games is also another option here. Maybe something like Ever Oasis, but like I do think that game has a richer soundtrack that could be expanded on a little bit more, and not necessarily have. I'm really caught up on this loop. That's the thing. Like just having it be so short puts it in.
I really don't know why it is looped that short, to be honest. I maybe could have done more research and it might be a longer song and that person just looped it.
Interesting.
I could be wrong.
Yeah, it is weird though, isn't it? Like it doesn't really feel like it makes a lot of sense to loop like that. But I'm gonna have to say something, so I'm just gonna say Ever Oasis because it has a little bit of those vibes to it, and it sounds like it could be a 3DS game, although it could be a little bit older than that. That's my throw out guess, but it's probably wrong.
Is that your final answer?
Let's just throw it in, yeah.
That's incorrect.
Yeah, I thought so.
Your theory on fantasy was correct.
Okay.
And this game isn't fantasy, but there is a level that is fantasy.
Okay.
And this is a boss fight from that level.
Interesting. I still don't have any guesses, so you can go ahead and reveal it, I guess.
It's Luigi's Mansion 3.
Oh.
Yeah, so this is
weird.
One of the early like floors you're on is like this fantasy medieval themed floor, and then the boss is called McFrights, King McFrights, and this is the theme music to that boss battle. This was the hardest of the 5. That's why I put it last. Like this, I think, was the toughest because you would associate, Luigi's Mansion with like strings and oboe and just kind of like very dark, sad kind of tones, whereas this is like a more upbeat fantasy theme merged with a more dark tone, and it kind of makes you think like, what is going on there? But yeah, it's because it's Luigi's Mansion 3 and it's melding, that fantasy theme of that floor with the kind of spooky, ghostly vibes of Luigi's Mansion.
That is really weird, yeah, especially with the loop thing going on. Like, I think that's the thing that threw me off of like, well, it can't be a modern game because that, like, the 20-second loop is what they did back on the Super Nintendo, so has to be older. And it didn't sound like as, I guess there's instrumentation there, but yeah, you're right. Like, there's a bit more texture, I think, to a lot of the other Luigi's Mansion songs, generally. And I think that game has really good music and generally is a nice soundtrack to go back to and listen to, but... yeah, it's. I mean, that game's just phenomenal. It's such a good game. The more I, have distance from it, the more I'm like, this is easily one of the best games on Switch. And I think it's just like next level have really ascended with this game, and I'm excited to see what they do with Mario Strikers. But that game is going to be what it is, which is a football game that they're iterating on, and I think Luigi's Mansion 3 really allowed them to flex their muscles into a full blown masterpiece. I'm going to say that game. So. Enjoyed it a lot, and I think the music is very good. But yeah, that was a hard one. That was really difficult. So if anyone else out there got it, then congratulations, because I certainly I was not close to sniffing that one out. But yeah, there we go. I guess I got 1 out of 5. So.
I got 1 out of 5 last time, so
yeah.
We're all square.
We're all square. I think Unpacking, I'm kicking myself on. That's one that's really...
I thought Spiritfarer was like... I thought that was a gimme. I thought you would get that one.
Yeah, it's so hard.
Unpacking, I was lukewarm on, and then Astral Chain, I had no idea whether you'd get that or not, but I thought you'd get Spiritfarer, and I actually thought you'd get Death's Door, so you did well on that one. So.
Yeah, no, I did get that one after some deductive logic, but yeah, I think this gets harder and harder as we play more and more games. That's the hard thing, is like on the other monitor, I'm like scrolling through my backloggery, just trying to remember every video game I've played, and it's...
Here's the thing, a lot of these aren't in your backloggery where you'd expect to find them because you play a lot of these games on non-Nintendo systems.
That's why I had Steam and Game Pass open, and also 3DS, and also every other fucking platform. So yeah, I had all the tabs. Apparently, I have beaten 540 games on backloggery. Wow. So yeah,
what do you think I've beaten?
It always gets harder and harder. I think you're like 300 or something. I can't remember.
I'm on 307.
Yeah. Oh wow, nice. Yeah. Yeah, so we've played a lot of fucking video games over the course of this show and our lives, so it always gets harder and harder, especially when you only have one song to guess it, because I think, with a show like Radio Trivia that NWR does, they have 3 songs for every game, as well as a hint question, which makes things a lot more feasible, but obviously we can't do that in just one segment of the show. So anyway, thanks, Bally, for that. That was enjoyable, challenging as always, but good fun time.
Worries,
and yeah, we'll I'm sure circle back around to this in the future, where I will have to get my revenge and do some songs for Bally. So we'll see how it goes. I always like putting some fun things, some recognizable things in there that are a bit easier, but also like getting the challenge in there.
Are you implying I didn't put any easy ones?
No, you put some ones that I should have gotten, but I think it's just like things get really hard at a certain point, and it's as we continue to use things, the amount that we can do gets lower and lower. So that's just how it goes. But anyway, that is going to wrap us up for this part of the show and the show itself in general. As we talked about at the start, you can also send in emails to get read out on the show and answered on the show, and Bally will tell you where you can send them.
Please send your emails to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That's ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We left out emails this time, but we'll definitely get back there next episode.
Yeah. Absolutely. Look forward to getting through some of those. You can obviously find the show in various places across the internet. You can go to places like Stitcher, like Spotify, and go ahead and rate and review us on there. Thank you, everybody, for rating us on Spotify. We have passed 50 ratings, which is awesome. 55-star ratings, which is a very, very cool thing.
Thank you. That's awesome.
And really appreciate that. And even if you don't use Spotify, if you go over there, just listen to a little bit of an episode. It will let you
have to
rate
listen
the
to
episode.
Like a minute. So if you can put
something
up
like
with
that.
our voice for just a minute,
Yeah.
it'd be greatly appreciated.
Which if you listen to the show on a regular basis...
If you're at the end of the show, you've probably listened to a minute by now. So
yeah, probably. Yeah, I think
you
so.
can,
You're
you
probably
can
there.
listen to one more.
Yeah, one more, and help us out there on Spotify. That'd be very much appreciated. So thank you to everyone who has done that. That is great. You can also rate and review us on iTunes, on Apple Podcasts, which is also another viable place for you to go and talk about the show.
Is iTunes a thing anymore? iTunes.
I think you can download the application. It's still called iTunes, right? I'm pretty sure you can. But
it's called. Is it? I think it's called.
Is it just Apple Music now?
It's called Music and Podcasts. They split them into two about 3 or 4 years ago, I believe. So.
But like when you download the program onto your computer, it still says iTunes, right?
No, it says Music.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh boy,
Well,
I haven't had iTunes downloaded for a few years now, so I wouldn't know. But yeah, damn, that's crazy.
Because I've got 3 apps next to each other, and they're music, podcasts, and TV. And before they were all part of one thing. So I guess it launched when Apple TV launched. I guess they split them all and wanted it to all be separate. So yeah.
Well, I guess we should never use the word iTunes ever again. Yeah. I guess.
And they're packing in the can't remember what it's called, the iPod. They're rolling up, rolling out, rolling up, packing in the iPod.
Yeah. So anyway, you can find us in lots of places. Just look for This Nintendo Life. We're there. We're on YouTube. You can find us there. Links in the description for that, of course. And also our Discord server, which is a lovely, friendly place where people go and hang out and chat about various video game things. So go ahead and join the community over there and start chatting to folks. That's a good fun time. And you can find us on the internet in various places, such as Twitter.com, where we continue to spend a lot of time talking and listening and all those sort of things. You can find the podcast at TNL Podcast. You can find me at Lord NBZ. Where can they find you, Bally?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91.
Fantastic stuff. And I think that's pretty much it. Thanks for listening.
Patrons to thank.
Oh shit, that's correct. Hi. People pay us money. We shouldn't forget about it. I certainly didn't, of course. I was just going to roll into it, So you can obviously support the show on patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife. It's a great place to go. It's really good. I think the thing is, I need to end the show because my nose is just running with hay fever. If you haven't noticed at the end segment, I probably sound a bit bunged up. This entire segment, my nose has been fucking running down my face.
You can tell the time of year that our podcast comes out based on how MBZ sounds. And
exactly.
It's all hay fever related.
It's a fucking hay fever and decided today is the best day to ruin my nose, so that's what's happening. But anyway...
Well, I would like to say thank you to our patrons, especially to our $10 tier patrons. They are Zach S., Atari Alex, Thomas, Matthew, and Albert. Thank you all for your support. We just put out an episode last week called This Nintendo Life, and I gave my final thoughts on my 71 hours of Horizon Forbidden West. And spoilers, I like that game a lot, so go check out my thoughts on that there.
Yeah, go listen over there. You can obviously support the show at various different tiers and levels, and you can find it at patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife. So if you like us and want to hear more of us, then you can go over there. That, Bally, I think does it, right? Tell me anything else I've missed. So. That's fine. It's all good. Fantastic. Well, we'll be back in a couple of weeks' time to talk more about Nintendo and probably the impending potential announcement of something they're going to do.
I think between now and next show, I'm confident Nintendo will outline their summer plans.
I hope so. I hope that we get something around that period because it wouldn't feel the same without it. So I'm looking forward, fingers crossed, and we'll be there soon. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next time. Until then, bye-bye, folks. The musical interlude used on today's show was Freya City from Illusion of Gaia. Copyright Quintet, 1993.